September 30th, 2025, Marine Corps Base Quantico. Secretary of War Pete Hegseth stands in front of the military's top brass and announces 10 directives that will reshape how 2.1 million military members and Americans train, look, fight, and how we advance. He was basically up there, bing, 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 changing everything. Some of these changes are already in effect right now. Some are still being written, and some we may never see. We don't know. We don't know how this is all gonna happen. But all of them are worth understanding, because whether you wear the uniform, whether you know somebody who does, or you just care about how America defends itself, this matters. So we're going to walk through everything that's actually changing, what people are saying about it, what happens next. I'm just saying this from a neutral position. I'm not leaning one way or the other. I'm just telling you everything that I saw on social media and Reddit, Facebook, all of that stuff. So starting with physical, fitness standards are getting a major reset, y'all. Starting right now. This isn't something that's coming later. This is right now. Every service member takes a PT test twice a year. It doesn't matter your rank. It doesn't matter your job. Twice a year you test, and you're weighing in twice a year too. But here's where it gets specific. If you're in a combat like job, infantry, armor, artillery, you're testing on the male standard now, not age adjusted, not gender adjusted, the male standard. And you need to score 70% or higher to pass that test. There's also a new combat field test coming. They say it's probably going to be like an Army expert physical fitness assessment or Marine Corps combat fitness test. Full gear, any environment, designed to measure whether you can actually do the job rather than just be able to run and do some push-ups. Now, I'm a bit confused on that because currently the Air Force does not have a combat field test. There was this fake memo that went out and it was talking about how the Air Force will have one. We later determined that that was fake. So I don't know if the Air Force is going to get one, but as it stands, the Air Force has to do 2 PT tests. Oh, and one more thing, PT every day. Unit PT or individual PT, it doesn't matter, but you will be doing PT every day because Pete Hegseth said we're not going to have any more fatties. We're going to be doing hard PT. We're not going to be doing stuff like yoga and stretching. Now, when you get into the different forums, the different social media sites, a lot of people have different thoughts about this. You have supporters that say that it's just common sense, like your teammates needs to be able to drag you out of a firefight, and it shouldn't really matter about your age or your gender. But then you have people on the other side that say a 35-year-old signal analyst who's been killing it at their job for like a decade now might suddenly fail, not because they can't do their actual job, but because they can't match a 20-year-old in a PT test. But that memo has been signed. This one's happening. And for some people, this means hitting the gym differently than you've ever have. And for others, this could be the end of some people's career. But fitness is just the start, y'all. There's also a question of whether you know how to use your weapon. Proficiency requirements are expanding across the board. Hegseth said he doesn't want his son serving with anyone who isn't fully proficient on their assigned weapon, platform, or task. So now there's a push to make sure that every service member, regardless of their job, maintains some baseline proficiency in basic combat skills. It sounds like they're essentially taking that Marine Corps idea that every Marine is a rifleman and applying it across all the services. So whether you're a cook, a mechanic, IT specialist, it doesn't matter. Everyone needs to be able to fight if needed. This argument is pretty straightforward. Bases get attacked, convoys get ambushed, and when things go wrong, everyone needs to be able to defend themselves and their buddies. The argument against this is about time and specialization, because training hours are finite, right? You only get so many hours in a day. So every hour spent making a cyber analyst practice rifle drills or teaching them how to fight, they're not mastering their actual specialty. So no specific implementation on how this exactly gets measured across the different services, but the intent is clear. Everyone fights. And speaking of standards everyone has to meet, no more beardos. Grooming standards are getting stricter, y'all, specifically getting rid of beards. Hegseth says no more beards, no more long hair. If you want a beard, join special forces. That's a direct quote. That's what he said. There's an actual memo on this one. It says beards and goatees are prohibited for regular service members. Special operations can request exemptions. So if you have like a medical shaving profile, you used to be able to kind of ride those things indefinitely, but now you got 1 year, 12 months to resolve your issue. Also, the religious accommodations where people were saying they were like Nordic or they were saying they were Muslim or whatever it was, and they got to get their beards, they're saying they're rolling it back to prior to 2010 standards. And that's when you couldn't have one. And if you refuse to comply, they basically gonna flag you as non-deployable and give you the boot. So you got some people saying that this is about readiness and professionalism. They say that the gas mask needs to have a clean seal. And if you have a beard, you're gonna break that seal. So it means that you shouldn't be able to deploy anywhere. But the case for this, they got a lot of beard communities where people are saying it's been proven that you can seal a gas mask with a beard. Also, you have other allied militaries like the British, the Canadian forces, the Danish, and they allow their service members to have facial hair. So this one has a lot of people like upset. There's people mad about this one, but what can you do? So all these changes are for current members, but they're also making changes to basic training to enforce these standards early on. All of the different military branches are getting a reset. Air Force has already kind of rolled out theirs, but how the other branches are doing those is still unclear at this moment. Hegseth said basic training should be scary, tough, and disciplined. He then said that the drill instructors can conduct shark attacks, toss bunks and beds, and swear at the recruits. And he even said that they should be able to put hands on recruits. I don't know what this means, but he immediately added that they can't be reckless or violate the law. But it is interesting. There's no official memo that explicitly authorizes like any physical contact. The Air Force's new BMT 2.0 rollout, it talks about like longer PT sessions, small unit tactics, and field exercises, but it doesn't mention any hands-on correction. So this just might be Hegseth signaling intent rather than issuing like a policy, at least for now. But there's another training change that's already in motion. Mandatory training is getting slashed. All those CBTs, all those required briefings, online courses, PowerPoint sessions, all that stuff that they make us do. He's talking about getting rid of that. He wants more time in the motor pool, more time on the ranges, less time clicking through modules about cybersecurity awareness for like the third time in a year. I've been neutral so far, but I support this one. So while training is being reallocated, there's a bigger question about whether past training standards were even set correctly in the first place. So every standard that's changed since 2015 is now under review. Hegseth ordered an immediate audit of standards across every service, every unit, every schoolhouse, and every form of professional military education. If a physical or performance standard was altered, especially to accommodate like gender integration, it needs to be justified or it gets returned to the original level of which it was before. And he built this on 3 different tests. The first is the 1990 test. What was the standard in 1990 when the US won the Gulf War in 100 hours? If anything's changed since then, explain why. The second test was the E6 or the 03 test. Does this change make life easier or harder for E6s and captains, the people actually leading the troops? And third, the golden rule. Would you want your own kids serving under these standards? Now, this has caused a lot of commotion online. You got one side that's saying standards were lowered for political reasons, not operational ones. If requirements were changed so more people could qualify, then that means the force got weaker and it's time to fix it. And then you have the other side that's saying standards evolved based on the data of what the job actually requires. Women have proven themselves in combat time and time again, so updating the standards to reflect real job requirements isn't lowering them, it's correcting them. And speaking of how people advance through that system, the promotion system is getting overhauled as well. They're talking about basing it on pure merit. So here's what that means. It's supposed to be colorblind and gender neutral evaluation processes happening. So top performers are supposed to get promoted faster and poor performers are supposed to get removed quickly. That's what he said. Not just not promoted. He said removed quickly. But when it comes to accountability, the complaint process itself is changing dramatically. Inspector General and equal opportunity processes are getting a complete overhaul. So no more anonymous complaints, no more repeat complaints filing the same issue over and over, no more cases sitting in limbo for months. Now these complaints are getting assessed within 7 days. Any non-credible cases get closed quickly, and anyone who complains gets updates every 14 days. So this one causes a lot of different arguments. You got some people saying that leaders were being held hostage by endless anonymous complaints. One disgruntled troop could pretty much end a commander's career. So now this empowers the leaders to enforce standards without the fear of frivolous retaliation. And then the other side is saying that a 19-year-old private with a sergeant that's harassing them may not feel safe putting their name on that complaint. Even with all the protection they're saying they're giving them, anonymous reporting exists because retaliation is real. And as it stands, this process is changing. So whether it becomes faster or fairer, the data will show in time. Now, something else that came about was what even counts as toxic leadership anymore. So there's a 30-day review underway right now that's trying to define what toxic leadership is, what bullying and hazing and all of that stuff is. And so the goal is to make sure that commanders can enforce high standards without being labeled toxic for doing their job. Now, you got some people that say that the terms got weaponized and that demanding PT at 5:30 in the morning or enforcing grooming standards or giving honest negative feedback, they started calling that toxic when it's people just actually trying to be leaders. And then you have other people who say that these toxic leaders can ruin units. They can destroy morale and they can drive out good people out of the force. So you got two sides with two different definitions, but right now they're doing a review so they can really figure out what toxic is. And Hegseth said that the real toxicity is endangering subordinates with low standards. So the question is where the line falls between demanding and destructive. And while we're on culture shifts, you got three other changes that aren't formal directives, but they do signal major cultural shifts. First was social media. There was talk of new policies and cracking down on anonymous unit level pages that trash commanders or demoralize troops or even undermine cohesion. Think about this. Some people that run those pages, they're either retired or separated. So that's kind of weird how that's going to happen. Second was the DEI, the diversity, equity, inclusion programs being dismantled. Hegseth said no more identity months, no more DEI offices, no more climate change initiatives, and no more gender ideology accommodations. Hegseth literally said no more dudes in dresses. So what that specifically means sounds like he's getting rid of a lot of different things that the military used to celebrate on the basis, like Pride Months, even maybe Black History Month. Diversity offices getting shut down. And this is causing a lot of people to be upset. You got some people that's saying that the military isn't social engineering, it's national defense. Every minute spent on diversity initiatives is a minute spent on not being lethal. And then you got the other side that's saying we're already struggling to recruit. You got women who are 17% of the force. You got minimal minority representation in the commission ranks. So signaling that only certain people are welcome doesn't just hurt the morale, it hurts the recruiting numbers and retention. So something important to note that as of right now in October, there's no formal memos that exist currently that are eliminating DEI offices. This was just in Hegseth's speech. The implementation of it all could take months, and it's probably going to face a lot of legal challenges as well. So there's a little bit of gap between the rhetoric and the regulation here. And the third culture change was the rules of engagement. Now, Hegseth said that there will be no more politically correct, overbearing rules of engagement. Maximum lethality. I don't really know what that means. That's a crazy soundbite. But basically, it sounds like increased authority for like war fighters and untying their hands while they're on the battlefield. Same kind of thing with the DEI. The Secretary of War can't just change rules of engagement. So it sounds like the intent for future conflicts, but maybe not something immediate right now. But I hope this kind of summarizes everything that we've seen so far. I kind of want to see what you all think, so I'd love to see y'all's opinions in the comment. But even though all these changes are being made, the military still has its traditions. Matter of fact, I just made a video talking about 6 weird traditions that the military has. If you want to stay with me and continue watching videos, I got a video on the screen right now breaking that down. But like I always say, I hope this video brought value to you. Stay beautiful, stay classy, and until next time, check me out.